So they were startled to find that that is no longer the case, that the reverse is now the case, that the children of immigrants who do not speak English are now at an advantage compared to American kids born and raised in this country. Children of immigrants who do not speak English are now less likely to be anxious, depressed, and disengaged compared to the American kids. Children of immigrants who do not speak English at home are many times more likely to win the science fair, to be valedictorian, on a whole range of academic parameters, outperform American kids born and raised in the United States, here in the United States. And when scholars began to document this, again, going back about 20 years, and it's getting bigger year by year, they were startled, as I said. And so they coined the phrase the immigrant paradox, because it seemed paradoxical to them that the children of immigrants who do not speak English now enjoy a substantial advantage in the United States over the American kids born and raised in this country. So I'm a medical doctor. When a medical doctor uses the term dose-response effect with regard to a toxin, what we mean is that the more you are exposed to a toxin, the more likely you are to experience an adverse outcome. That boy and that girl from India, the first week they're here, the first month they're here, they're very unlikely to experience any of these bad outcomes. But if they stay here, and especially if they begin speaking English at home as a marker of assimilation into American culture, their risk begins to rise. And after 3, 4, 5 years, especially if they speak English at home, their risk will approach that of the neighbor kid born and raised in the United States. Studies like these have led scholars to conclude that American popular culture is now toxic to children and teenagers. And when they use the word toxic, they're not using that word in a derogatory sense, but merely in a descriptive sense. Meaning the more you are exposed to American culture as a child or teenager, the more likely you are to become anxious, depressed, disengaged from school, and many other bad outcomes. Why? What happened? American popular culture was a healthy and nurturing culture for kids 50 years ago, 30 years ago, but not anymore. Great song. Why is becoming American now a major risk factor for anxiety, depression, drug and alcohol use, disengagement from school, and many other bad outcomes? That's one of the questions that we need to answer this evening. To get a handle on that, I think it's helpful to take a step back and talk to some comparative anthropologists, as I did in writing my book, Boys Adrift. I spoke to comparative anthropologists like Gilbert Hurt, and especially David Gilmore at the State University of New York at Stony Brook. And I said to Professor Gilmore, I said, talk to me about cultures that last, cultures that have been around for thousands of years. Is there anything that all enduring cultures share? Well, let's think about the Navajo, the native people of the southwestern United States, and let's contrast them with Orthodox Jews. These are two cultures that have been around for thousands of years. They're still with us. We know a lot about them. Is there anything they share in terms of what they eat, what they're not allowed to eat, what they drink, how they dress, or what their religious beliefs are? The answer would be no. On each of the parameters I just mentioned, those two cultures have nothing in common. That's why I use them as exemplars, because they are so profoundly different. Their religious beliefs could not be more opposite. But there is one thing that they share, one thing that the scholars tell us that all enduring cultures share, and that is strong bonds across generations. So that's a photograph of Kenolda. Now, if you know only a little about the Navajo, and someone says, what's Kenolda? What does that word mean? You might say, well, it's a rite of passage. When a Navajo girl has her first menstrual period, she stays in the home of her grandmother for 4 days and 4 nights. And during those 4 days and nights, all of her adult female relatives, her aunts and cousins, call on her, and she demonstrates to them that she has indeed mastered the arts and crafts of Kenolda. The arts and crafts that are taught by Navajo women to Navajo girls, and only to girls, and not to boys. And that's true enough as far as it goes, but it's more than a rite of passage. It's a process that's been going on usually 2, 3, 4 years by the time this girl actually gets her menstrual period. And incidentally, this is not primarily mother-daughter. Mom traditionally plays very little role in teaching her daughter. It's the grandmothers and the women of the grandmother's generation who take the lead. And that's a common, although not a universal feature of enduring cultures, that the grandparents play a big role. You have a community of women for girls and a community of men for boys. Now, I'm sure many of you have heard of bar mitzvah. But if you're not connected to someone in the Orthodox community, you may not know that in the Orthodox community, every aspect of religious life is single sex. The men and boys worship here, there's a barrier, and the women and girls worship here. Every Saturday in an Orthodox synagogue, you read a particular portion from the 5 books of Moses. When you finish that liturgical cycle, you finish the last chapter of Deuteronomy, now you're starting over with Genesis 1:1. That night, all the men, and only the men, stay up traditionally dusk till dawn, singing and dancing. You have older men with younger men, with boys. You have a community of men for boys, teaching each boy, this is what it means to be a Jewish man. That's not that boy's father, it's another man in the synagogue. You have a community of women for girls, teaching each girl, this is what it means to be a Jewish woman. Now, what that Jewish girl is learning is totally different from what the Navajo girl is learning. There's almost no overlap in the content, but the process is the same. In every enduring culture, you have a community of women for girls, a community of men for boys, and strong bonds across generations. And that used to be true of us. This evening, when I use words like us and we, I mean Americans who speak English at home. We don't have to guess, and this is not nostalgia. We have scholars like Robert Putnam, who has spent more than 30 years leading an army of graduate students across the United States. Robert Putnam at Harvard, conducting more than 200,000 structured interviews, documenting that 50 years ago, you could go into any neighborhood in the United States, just about, and you'd find a sewing circle, organized not by kin relation, but by geographic proximity. His students dig up who was in the sewing circle on Scottsdale Boulevard in Shaker Heights, Ohio in 1970. Well, there were older women, younger women, and girls. His students document not only formal, but also informal associations. So they get a photograph from Minot, North Dakota, summer of 1969. A bunch of guys working under the hood of the car. Who were the men and boys in that picture? They dig up. What were their names? How old were they? And you find there were older men, younger men, and boys. Teenage boys. You can drive around your neighborhood nowadays on a Saturday afternoon, and you just might see 2 old geezers working under the hood of their 65 Corvette, but the boys are not with them. Dr. Putnam finds it's now very unusual to find that the boys are working under the hood of the car with the older men. The boys are more likely indoors playing video games. Bowling used to be more popular in the United States, but more importantly, from Dr. Putnam's perspective, it was done differently. And 50 years ago, most of the bowling was in bowling leagues. And again, his students dig up, all right, who was in the bowling league in Lake Forest, Illinois in December of 1969? Well, let's see, on this team, there was a 53-year-old woman, a 37-year-old woman, a 26-year-old woman, a 17-year-old girl, and a 12-year-old girl. Kids in the United States still go bowling, but they go bowling alone. Meaning not literally alone, but instead of this girl going bowling with a community of women, she's going bowling with a bunch of 17-year-olds, girls and boys mixed together. Which, as far as Dr. Putnam is concerned, is bowling alone. When Dr. Putnam uses the term community, he means bonds across generations. And the bonds across generations have been broken. Again, first question we're trying to answer this evening is, what changed in American culture? What can explain the fact that American culture was once a nurturing and healthy culture for kids, and it is no longer? One change is the breaking of bonds across generations. Another change The anthropologists teach us that every enduring culture is characterized by bonds of respect. Kids are taught to respect their elders, and that was true for us. Again, by us, I mean Americans who speak English at home. And that was true a generation ago, even if the parents themselves were lousy parents who never said a word about it. It didn't matter. If this kid spoke English at home and watched American television, they were immersed in a culture that did teach it. You look at the most popular TV shows from 50 years ago, shows like The Dick Van Dyke Show, My Three Sons, The Andy Griffith Show. The parents in these shows, this is Dick Van Dyke Show, My Three Sons, The Andy Griffith Show, the parents in these shows are consistently knowledgeable, competent, reliable, thoughtful, productive, caring, kind. That was characteristic of American television in that era, but not anymore. Longest running television comedy on American television right now is The Simpsons. Homer Simpson is a bum, his son's an idiot. His wife varies, sometimes she's wise, more often she is not. The only one of the four major leads who's consistently wise and insightful is the daughter, Lisa. But I'm not picking on this show. I do not see this show as a cause. I see this show as a symptom. I have high regard for the people who write for this show. I think they have great insight into what's actually happened in American culture. In one episode, you get to see inside Homer Simpson's brain. Homer Simpson's brain has three major drives: sleep, donuts, and beer. I think there's great insight there. If you imagine a television cartoon a generation ago depicting the brain of an American man, it probably would have shown the entire brain as a sex drive. That was the stereotype of American men 50 years ago, that they were only interested in sex. Not anymore. Now it's about sleep, donuts, and beer. I think there's great insight there. The testosterone levels of young American men have dropped by half over the past 60 years. The sperm counts of American men have dropped by more than half over the past 45 years. So again, I think these writers have real insight. In writing my book, The Collapse of Parenting, I've reviewed the 150 most popular television shows on American television right now to see how many of them depict a parent as knowledgeable, competent, reliable, responsible. Often or even occasionally. Out of those 150 shows, I found one that depicts a parent as knowledgeable, competent, responsible, caring. And that one outlier show is Blue Bloods, starring Tom Selleck. This is now a unique outlier among the most popular American television shows. This is not characteristic of contemporary American television. A show that is much more characteristic of American television right now would be Modern Family. The straight dad is consistently an idiot whose bumbling antics are the butt of the joke. We are expected to laugh at him. His three kids are generally wiser and more insightful than their idiot dad. If you don't watch the Disney Channel, you might think, oh, Disney Channel, that's got to be family friendly. Wrong. The Disney Channel is a major vector of what I've come to call the culture of disrespect. This Disney show, Dog with the Blog, the father, supposedly a school psychologist, knows nothing about what kids want or what kids need. The talking dog is always wiser and more insightful than the dumb, out-of-touch, clueless dad. This Disney Channel show, Liv and Maddie, the two girls who are as different as they can be, the one thing they agree on is that their mother, also supposedly a school psychologist, knows nothing about the behavior or motivation of kids. The two girls roll their eyes in disbelief at the ridiculous, clueless, out-of-touch suggestions made by their dopey mom. Many times as a family doctor, I have had parents say to me, so one mom said to me, she said, you know, our 8-year-old daughter has such a mouth. She talks back. She's defiant, disrespectful. I don't know where she's getting this. The teachers at school are nothing like that. Her father and I never talk that way. And I said to Mom, turn off the Disney Channel. No more Disney Channel, no more Nickelodeon, no more Nick Jr. And 3 weeks later, Mom called me and said, Oh my gosh. The bad-mouthing his thumb. She was learning it from the Disney Channel. On the Disney Channel, the kids think it's funny and cute to be disrespectful to their parents. That's where she was getting it from. No Disney Channel in your house. That's one recommendation I encourage you to take home this evening. Girls and boys are not born knowing what it means to be ladies and gentlemen. They have to be taught. And we no longer teach them, and they look to the marketplace. And the marketplace has changed. That's Sam Cooke. A generation ago, Sam Cooke had a #1 hit song here in the United States. He sang Don't Know Much About History. He sang, now I don't claim to be an A student, but I'm trying to be. Because maybe by being an A student, baby, I could win your love for me. He goes on to mention French, geometry, and trigonometry as subjects in which he's going to try harder to earn an A rather than a B, because he believes that by earning an A rather than a B, he will raise his status in the eyes of the pretty girl. And that was a #1 hit song in the United States. That was characteristic of American culture a generation ago. In that era, American popular culture, the culture of people who spoke English at home, was the culture of John Lennon, Paul McCartney, Simon and Garfunkel, Petula Clark, Aretha Franklin. Not anymore. That is not the culture in which American kids are growing up right now. The four most popular women on Instagram right now, each of whom has more than 150 million followers on Instagram. Ariana Grande, Selena Gomez, Kylie Jenner, Kim Kardashian. American popular culture is now a culture of disrespect. A culture where the most popular celebrities and entertainers think it's cute and funny to be disrespectful to one another. The culture of Eminem, Nicki Minaj, Miley Cyrus, Akon. Akon chose the name Akon to remind you of his claim. He claims to be Akon. He claims to be a convicted felon. He claims to have served 2 years for Grand Theft Auto in the Georgia State Penitentiary, a claim which turns out to be false. When he got to be famous, the reporters looked it up and they found that, well, he was arrested once on a charge of possession of one item of stolen property. Those charges were quickly dismissed. He's never been convicted of anything, and he's never been in a penitentiary except to perform. American popular culture has changed from a culture in which young men want you to think they were scholars working hard to earn an A rather than a B, to a culture in which many young men would like you to think they're convicted felons or gang members, even if they are not. That's a significant change. Bruno Mars. At the Grammys 2 years ago, Bruno Mars was the big winner, 6 Grammys, more than anyone else, including the Grammy for Best Song. There he is, holding up his Grammy for Song of the Year. What was the best song of the year, in the opinion of the Recording Academy? I got a condo in Manhattan, baby girl, it's Hatton. You and your blank invited. So go on and get to clapping. Turn around and drop it for a player. Drop it for me. There is a snap from the YouTube video, which has had over 1.4 billion views. That's billion with a B. So he's addressing a woman he appears not to know. He's offering her champagne, then diamonds, then a shopping spree in Paris, and finally offers to hand her his wallet if she will just turn around and pop it for a player, because that's what I like. That's the title of the song. That's what I like. This is a #1 hit song in the United States and the best song of the year, in the opinion of the Recording Academy. He's offering money for sex. Money makes her smile. Not love or courtesy or respect. Money makes her smile. Imagine a young man in the workplace approaching a young woman and saying, "Hey, baby girl, what's happening? You and your ass invited. How about you turn around and pop it for a player?" And then offering her money. What would happen to that young man? He would be fired. Or if he's lucky, he would be sent to some required education, a workshop on sexual harassment, where he would learn that addressing a woman as you and your ass is objectification, He would be told that offering a colleague money for sex is never allowable, but he might reasonably respond, hey, that's exactly what Bruno Mars does in his song, and he got a #1 hit song, 1.4 billion views on YouTube, and the Grammy for Best Song. How should a young man know if he has received no instruction? If he is immersed in a culture that is telling him, this is what's cool. This is the most popular song. I have lived in this country all my life. I am old enough to remember another #1 hit song in the mid-1970s, Loggins and Messina, Danny's song. Even though we ain't got money, I'm so in love with you, honey. Everything will bring a chain of love. And in the morning when I rise, bring a tear of joy to my eyes and tell me everything is going to be all right. That was characteristic of American culture in living memory. We're not talking about the Civil War here. It's the mid-1970s, even though we ain't got money. That's not American culture anymore. Money makes her smile is now characteristic of American culture. So at the Grammys last year, the big winner was Childish Gambino, also known as Donald Glover. He was the big winner, Best Song, for his song, This Is America. Well, that's an interesting title. This is America. We just want the money. All right, so America, in his judgment, is first and foremost about money, but not only about money. So he then goes into a room where 10 African Americans are singing gospel music, takes a machine gun, kills them all, and holds up his arms in triumph. America is also about mindless violence. Money, violence, and sex. So if you Google the phrase, what are the hidden messages in Childish Gambino's Grammy Award-winning song, This Is America, you'll get over 1,000 hits, over 1,000 videos. This is one of them that I watched. And in this video, the narrator is saying, okay, you remember that scene where he killed the African American singing gospel music? Well, the narrator continues, I'm thinking that is a reference to Dylan Roof killing the 9 African Americans at the church in Charleston, South Carolina, because see, 10 is 9 plus 1. Got it? So, and maybe it is. I am not here attempting an adult critique of Donald Glover's video, which got the Grammy for Best Video as well as Best Song. I'm just asking you to consider, what is the message your 12-year-old is getting when they're searching the most popular videos on YouTube, the best videos? What got the Grammy for Best Video? Well, this did. What is the surface message that your 12-year-old is getting? Your 12-year-old doesn't remember Dylan Roof and Charleston. He was 7 when that happened. The surface message that your kid is getting from this video is that America is about sex, money, and violence. After all, it got the Grammy for Best Video, Best Song. The message is that America is not deserving of respect, that nothing is deserving of respect. 10 days ago, the big winner this year, Billie Eilish, the first woman ever to sweep the big 4 Grammys in one night, including the Grammy for Best Song, Bad Guy. What are the lyrics of Bad Guy? Well, they're pretty straightforward. I'm the bad guy, duh. I'm only good at being bad. So another very successful #1 hit song and the best song of the year, in the opinion of the Recording Academy. Okay, we need a number of disclaimers here. First of all, Bruno Mars, Donald Glover, and Billie Eilish are all gifted and talented and creative musicians. Each of them has a fascinating story, Bruno Mars was homeless on the streets of Honolulu, worked himself up from nothing to become a superstar. These are all very creative people, but they are conforming to the culture in which they find themselves. They find themselves in a culture where being disrespectful is cute and funny and cool, and they conform to that culture. And they create within that culture, and they perpetuate that culture. They do not challenge it, they perpetuate it. They thrive on it. And they're doing very well, promoting the culture of disrespect. Other disclaimers. American culture is a big place. There's a lot of things happening in American culture. The #1 hit song, the Grammys, are not all there is to American culture. If you dig, you can find some very good things. And when I have a little more time, I lead a full-day workshop for teachers called Building a Culture of Respect in the School. And we dig a little deeper into American culture. And I talk about Chris Janson and his song, Drunk Girl. Take a drunk girl home. Let her sleep all alone. Close the door, lock the door. That's how she'll know the difference between a boy and a man. A man takes a drunk girl home and makes sure she's safe. So Chris Janson's song has had about 8 million views on YouTube, which means that Bruno Mars' song is about 150 times more popular. And I am not endorsing Chris Janson without reservation. I am well aware of his song, The Power of Positive Drinking, which is an ode to binge drinking. Now I've had 10, I feel good again. But I want to make clear that I understand the depth and complexity of American culture. My point is that the dominant culture, the culture of the #1 hit songs, the most popular celebrities on Instagram, the Grammy Award winners, the most successful YouTube videos, is relentlessly a culture of disrespect. This was not true 40 years ago or even 20 years ago. It is true today. So the first chapter of my book, The Collapse of Parenting, I present more evidence beyond what you've heard here to support my claim that American popular culture, the culture of the most popular YouTube videos, the #1 hit songs, is relentlessly a culture that teaches kids that it's cute and funny to be disrespectful to adults, but not only to adults. American popular culture now teaches kids that it's cute and funny to be disrespectful to one another. It is common to find American kids wearing t-shirts that say things like, "Do I look like I care? I'm out of your league. You look better on Facebook. You look like I need another drink. I don't need you. I have Wi-Fi. I'm not shy, I just don't like you." I spoke to students across Scotland, in Edinburgh, in Perthshire, and in Stirling, and I showed them some of these t-shirts. And the kids in Scotland were baffled. They asked, "Why would you leave the house wearing a t-shirt that says to the whole world, 'I'm not shy, I just don't like you'?" For the kids in Scotland, that didn't seem funny, it seemed rude and childish. But American kids, marinated in the culture of disrespect, find this sort of thing funny. I was actually in Sydney, Australia, and I did see a teenage boy wearing a t-shirt with these words, different design, but the same words, "I'm not shy, I just don't like you." And I went up to him. It turned out he was an American kid on vacation. This is a North American phenomenon. You do not find these t-shirts outside of North America. So again, the first question we're trying to answer this evening is, American culture a generation ago was a healthy and nurturing culture for kids. It is not. It is now a toxic culture, empirically. What happened? Well, the bonds across generations have been broken, and the culture of disrespect has emerged. Those factors affect girls and boys equally. The next two do not. Video games, as we will see, affects boys more than girls. So scholars find that girls and boys tend to play different games, and they play them differently. So Farmville was big for girls a few years back. Candy Crush is big right now, so is Homescapes. When you ask who has spent more than 3 hours in the last week playing games like Candy Crush and Homescapes, you find that girls outnumber boys. Most popular video games for American boys are Fortnite, Call of Duty, Grand Theft Auto, RDR2, Assassin's Creed, Halo. Average girl playing Candy Crush or Homescape spends about 20 minutes in a session. The average boy playing Call of Duty or Grand Theft Auto spends about 2.5 hours in a session. So I was speaking at a high school, and I was sharing with the students some research about the effects of video games, and I referred to Call of Duty as a video game. And one of the boys raised his hand, and I called on him, and very politely he said, "Excuse me." He said, "Call of Duty is not a game, it is a lifestyle." And the other boys hooted and hollered and applauded as he pulled off his uniform shirt to reveal his Call of Duty t-shirt underneath. I've never had a girl make a similar comment about Candy Crush. Although I did see a girl wearing Candy Crush leggings, so maybe that counts. What's the relation between how much time you spend playing video games and how well you do in school? Scholars find that below a threshold of 6 hours a week, there is no relation. A kid who spends 5 hours a week playing video games does no better and no worse on average than the kid who doesn't play video games at all. Beyond that threshold of 6 hours a week, there is a linear and negative association. So the kid who spends 10 hours a week does less well in school on average than the kid who spends 5 hours a week. The kid who spends 20 hours a week does much less well. And I spoke to Craig Anderson and I asked him, why is that so? And he answered with one word. He said, displacement. What he means by displacement is that if you're spending 20 hours a week playing video games, that's 20 hours a week you're not doing something else, like studying or sleeping. The average American boy now spends 9 hours and 13 minutes a week playing video games, compared to 1 hour and 38 minutes a week for the average girl. In your handout, you will find these guidelines, which the researchers have created based on their research. No more than 40 minutes a night on school nights playing video games, no more than an hour a day on weekends, and your minutes do not roll over. So if you go 3 weeks without playing video games, that does not mean you're allowed 7 hours for a Fortnite binge. That is binge gaming, and it is harmful. No screen time until all the chores are done and all the homework is done, and that means no devices in the bedroom. No video game consoles in the bedroom. Scholars define a violent game as a game in which you must kill in order to win. All the most popular video games for American boys are violent games. So these researchers did a remarkable study, recruited over 3,000 kids at 12 years of age, and followed them all for 3 years. At enrollment, got all kinds of information: race, ethnicity, household income, family composition. How much time does a kid spend playing video games? What video games is he playing? And they also did a comprehensive psychological assessment to quantify for each one of these kids, to what extent is this particular kid altruistic or selfish, honest or dishonest, patient or impatient, gentle or hostile. So the way to conceptualize this study is to imagine two identical boys. And by identical, I mean not only that these two boys had the same race, ethnicity, household income, family composition, but also both boys spent 20 hours a week playing video games, and they score exactly the same on all these psychological parameters. The only difference between these two boys is one boy, his parents do not allow him to play violent video games. So he's playing Madden NFL football, NBA basketball, FIFA soccer. The boy next door, he's in his bedroom with the door closed, headset on, the parents have no idea what games he's playing. He's playing the most popular video games, Grand Theft Auto, Call of Duty, and so forth. At enrollment, as I said, these two boys are identical on all these psychological parameters. But after 3 years, the boy playing the violent games changes relative to the boy playing the non-violent games. He becomes more selfish, less honest, less patient, more hostile. And after 3 years, the size of that effect is pretty large. After 3 years, the difference between these two boys who were identical at enrollment is comparable to the difference between a boy raised in a loving and nurturing home all his life and a boy raised in a violent and abusive home all his life. And yet the boy who's been playing the violent games has no awareness of how he has changed. So let me give you an example of one of the clever things the researchers did. At enrollment, technician does a comprehensive psychological assessment, and the technician finally says, all right, we're all done, thank you very much. Exit the store, go down the hallway, make a left turn to find the waiting area where your parents are, goodbye. Boy goes out in the hallway. There's a $20 bill on the floor. At age 12, most of the kids pick up the $20 bill, walk it back into the technician, and say, hey, somebody must have just dropped a $20 bill on the floor. Would you please turn it in? Lost some time, I'm sure they'll be looking for it. 3 years later, you bring all the kids back, one by one, once again to do the comprehensive psychological assessment. Once again, the technician says, all right, thank you very much, we're all done. Exit that door, go down the hallway, turn left, you'll find your parents, goodbye. Kid goes out in the hallway. Once again, there's a $20 bill on the ground. The boy who's been playing the sports games picks up the $20 bill, walks it back in the technician, and says, hey, just found the $20 bill on the ground, would you please turn it in? That's the funniest thing. Same exact thing happened here 3 years ago. It's like somebody who's just sprinkling $20 bills on it. The boy who's been playing violent games goes out in the hall, sees a $20 bill, looks both ways, there's nobody there. Bends over, picks it up, stuffs it in his pocket, leaves the building. But when you say to that boy, have you changed at all as a result of playing these games? Have you become any more likely to take something that does not belong to you? He said, no, I haven't changed as a result of playing these games. I know it's just a game. I'm not going to go out and shoot anybody. That's ridiculous. He has no awareness of how much he has, in fact, changed. And Anderson and Gentili wonder why. Why does he have no awareness? And they answer their own question. The answer they give is that we lead our moral lives relative to our nearest neighbor. We judge ourselves relative to our nearest neighbor. Turns out that boys who are spending 20 hours a week playing violent video games are hanging out with other boys who spend 20 hours a week playing violent video games. And they are all changing, but they are not changing relative to one another. So this boy is absolutely certain that he has not changed. He has no awareness of how much he has, in fact, changed. Some violent games are worse than others. And by worse, I mean they push this change from honest to dishonest, from patient to impatient, from altruistic to selfish, farther and faster than other games. The worst games are games which employ what Anderson and Gentili call a moral inversion. A moral inversion means that in the context of the game, good is bad and bad is good. So if you're playing Grand Theft Auto, you must acquire money and weapons in order to complete your mission. And you can get the best weapons by killing police officers. So in the context of this game, it would be a really great idea to sneak up on some police officers and kill them before they know what you're up to. And that way you get their weapons. That's the only way you can get their weapons. You have to kill them. Now in the real world, to sneak up on police officers and kill them just because they're police officers would be insane and evil. But in the context of this game, it is a good and clever thing to do. If you want to play Grand Theft Auto with an avatar provided by the game, you must play as a man. The game provides no ready-made avatars who are women. There are women in the game. Many of them are prostitutes. If you get wounded in your firefight with a police officer, you can restore your health to 100% by having sex with a prostitute. That will cost you money. You go up to her, she tells you how much, you give her that money, and then you can have sex with her, meaning you watch your avatar flopping on top of her. But you need money in order to complete your mission. You don't have to do this. But it then makes good sense to pull your big knife out of your back pocket and stab her in the back. And as she collapses to the ground and moans and dies and blood pours out of her body, you get your money back. That's the only way you can get your money back. You have to kill her. Now, in the real world, to kill a prostitute to get your money back would be insane and evil. But in the context of this game, it is a good and clever thing to do. And this is the third most popular video game in the United States right now. Grand Theft Auto. Lawmakers in California were horrified. They were like, are you kidding me? The most popular video game? At the time that this happened, it was the most popular video game, as it will be again next year when GTA 6 comes out. Lawmakers in California said, are you kidding me? The most popular video game in the United States, Grand Theft Auto, is a game that the scholars find changes personality, causes kids to become more selfish, less honest, less patient. They flew Anderson and Gentili to Sacramento and took sworn testimony and wrote a law. The California statute made it a civil offense to sell not just any violent game, but the worst violent games, like Grand Theft Auto, to a minor child, a child under 18. Basically put these games in the same category as cigarettes, but then behind the counter, you'd have to show ID, show that you're at least 18 years old to buy the game. And the California statute was signed into law by then Governor Arnold Schwarzenegger, which is ironic. But the video game industry immediately brought suit, claiming that the California statute violated their First Amendment right of free speech. And the video game lawsuit went to the United States Supreme Court, and in a decision written by the late Justice Antonin Scalia, the United States Supreme Court agreed with the video game industry and threw out the California statute, rendering it null and void. And a concurrence written by Justice Samuel Alito. Justice Alito said, look, I have read the research of Anderson and Gentili, and I share the concerns of California parents and California lawmakers. These games are heinous. And that's the word he used. He said, and no child or teenager should be playing such games. He continued, nevertheless, it is the ruling of this court that deciding what games children will play is not the job of the California legislature, it's the job of the parent. And I've included a link to the full text of Justice Scalia's opinion and Justice Alito's concurrence in your handout, because you need to understand that there can be no law or regulation limiting the sale of any game to any child in the United States because the Supreme Court has so ruled, no matter how awful the game or how young the child. This is your job. You must know what games your son is playing. You must limit and guide what games your son is playing. When your son is going over to a friend's house, it is your job as his parent to call the friend's parents and say, hey, my son's going to be hanging with your son tomorrow afternoon. Will there be a grown-up around to make sure they are not playing a game like Grand Theft Auto? And the other boy's parents say, hey, they go in the bedroom, close the door, put on their headsets. I'm not going to waste my time chaperoning what games those teenage boys are playing. Then it's your job to say to your son, I am sorry, you are not allowed to go to that boy's house. This is your job. And there's lots of tools out there that make your job easier. So you ask your son, what game are you playing? And he tells you. You look it up at commonsense.org. And this link is in your handout. And they provide an accurate, valid, unbiased evaluation of the game. Let's pull up what they had to say about Grand Theft Auto. Grand Theft Auto, an M-rated game brimming with gang violence, nudity, extremely coarse language, drug and alcohol abuse. Playing as hardened criminals, players kill not only fellow gangsters, but also police officers and innocent civilians, using weapons and vehicles, conducting premeditated crimes, including a particularly disturbing scene involving torture, Women are depicted as sexual objects with a strip club minigame, allowing players to fondle strippers' bodies, which are nude from the waist up. None of the main characters is a decent role model. All of them are criminals who think of themselves first and others rarely at all. Okay, that sounds about right. This is a very useful site. I have no affiliation with commonsense.org, but I use it and I recommend it. Video games are more of a boys' issue. When the scholars ask, okay, among teenagers, who is spending more than 20 hours a week playing violent games? In that demographic, they find that boys outnumber girls by more than 8 to 1. So video games are more of a boys' issue. Social media are more of a girls' issue. And I think it's worth one slide to recall how quickly this has happened. 16 years ago, Facebook did not exist. According to Nielsen, more than half of American girls at age 12 are now on Instagram. 10 years ago, Instagram did not exist. It is now a major part of the lived experience of many American girls. Understand why that matters and why it matters for girls more than boys. I want you to imagine a girl living in ancient times. By ancient times, I mean the year 2000, 20 years ago. She's writing in her diary, by which I mean she's writing with a pen in a bound volume of blank pages. She's writing about who she likes, who she doesn't like, the kind of girl she most admires, the kind of woman she hopes to become, what she really wants out of life. She might write 5 pages in an evening. She's doing some important work. The great American psychologist Dr. Abraham Maslow said that figuring out what you want is not trivial. He believed many adults were miserable because they're working hard at jobs they don't like in pursuit of goals that are not meaningful to them. So this girl writing 5 pages about what do I really want? She's doing some important work. She's not going to show that to anybody. If she's a younger brother, she might keep it under lock and key. But it's important work. So fast forward to today. When I meet with high school kids, I'll ask them, who's on Instagram? A lot of hands go up. Who's on Facebook? A couple hands. Who's on Snapchat? All the hands. Who here has a diary? Only a few hands. And I'll ask, well, what's the difference between posting a photo, what's the difference between posting on Instagram and writing in a diary? I did this recently at a school in Nashville, Tennessee, and a girl in the front row, Lily Faye, raised her hand, and she said, Instagram is public, diary is private. Bingo. Instagram is public, diary is private. When researchers look at how American kids are using social media like Instagram, they don't find any 5-page essays about what I really want out of life. They find lots of photos. This is true for boys, and this is true for girls. Who posts more photos? Boys or girls? Well, girls do. How much more? 50% more? 80% more? No, it's 500% more. Girls post 5 times as many photos as the boys do, and the photos are different. Boy and a girl both go to a football game, and they both take pictures of the game. But the boy is taking a picture of the game, or the pretty cheerleader at the game. The girl is turning the phone on herself, and she's taking 100 selfies at the game. And then that evening, she's going through the 100 selfies, finding 2 or 3 where she's laughing and the kids around her are laughing, and that's what she posts on her Instagram. Here I am at the game, we had a great time. The difference between writing in a diary and posting on Instagram is the difference between living and performing. Social media, as used by American teenagers, researchers find, is a performance. There's nothing wrong with a performance. A performance is a show that you put on to entertain or amuse other people. I don't see anything wrong with that. As long as you understand that the performance has to come to an end, and you take off your mask and resume your real life. My concern, listening to American teenagers, and this is more true of girls than it is of boys, Many of them are trapped in what I've come to call the cyber bubble. Cyber bubble of 24/7 texting and social media, and the performance never ends, and the mask never comes off, and it is exhausting, and it is draining. These girls are hyper-connected to other girls their own age, but they are disconnected from themselves. Disconnected from themselves. The more time a teenager spends on social media, the more likely that teen is to become depressed. We know this now from multiple longitudinal cohort studies. Here's one in which they looked at kids on Instagram, and they found that the more time you spend on Instagram looking at other kids' Instagram, or looking to see how many likes you got on your own Instagram, the more likely you are to become depressed. And this was true for boys, but it's much more true for girls. The slope of that curve is much steeper for girls than it is for boys. So I met with Kathy Charles at her office, Napier University, different cohort, different group of kids, same result. The more time girls spend on social media, the more likely they are to become depressed. In her data, this was a very large effect for girls, but almost non-existent for boys, and she didn't know why. She could not explain the effect of sex, male versus female, in her own data. So she was very interested when I shared with her work done by Carol Dweck and her colleagues at Stanford, showing that girls are very ready to believe that other girls are having more fun than they are, that other girls' lives are more interesting than their own life is. This turns out to be not at all true for boys. Turns out that boys greatly overestimate how interesting their own life is to other people. And girls use social media differently than boys do. So Vanessa gets a puppy, and it's a really cute puppy, and she takes 200 pictures of her cute puppy and posts a dozen of the cutest pictures on Instagram. But I have some very sad news. Vanessa's puppy got loose, ran out into the street, got run over by a truck. The puppy is dead. But she did not post a photo of the dead dog on her Instagram. Boys do. It would not be unusual for an American boy to post a photo of the mangled corpse of his dead dog on his Instagram. A boy and a girl both get sick, they both throw up. The boy posts a photo of his own vomit on his Instagram. Girls never do that. Now, imagine a girl, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17 years of age, in her bedroom, looking at all the other girls' Instagram. There's Emily at the football game, she's having a great time. There's Vanessa with her new puppy and a cute. There's Madison at the party, she's having a blast. I'm just sitting here not doing anything. My life sucks. The more time a teen spends on Instagram, the more likely they are to become depressed. And you now know 3 mechanisms driving the sex difference, why girls are more at risk than boys are. First of all, girls are more invested in their posts than boys are. They post more, 5 times as many photos as boys do on average. If you don't like Jake's photo of the pretty cheerleader, he doesn't care. But if you don't like Emily's photo of Emily, she's going to take that more personally. Girls post most of the fun stuff, the happy stuff. This boy looking at Jake's vomit or Brett's dead dog is unlikely to want to be Jake or Brett. And boys greatly overestimate how interesting their own life is to begin with. So boys are, to some degree, on average, protected from the most toxic effects of social media. Girls are more vulnerable. Now I say that having myself counseled some boys who are clearly seriously and adversely affected by social media. But the average girl is going to be more vulnerable than the average boy to the toxic effects of social media. The average boy is more vulnerable than the average girl to the addictive properties of video games. Now, if a grown-up were in the room, grown-up could explain, look, everybody's life is a mix of happy and sad, of success and disappointment. And for most humans who've ever lived, more disappointment than success, more sadness than happiness. And that's true for those other girls, no differently than it's true for you. There is usually no grown-up in the room. She's looking at the other girl's Instagram, by herself. So what do you do about it? Well, the first step is to recognize that most 14-year-olds are not masters of time management. In one study, they asked this 14-year-old girl, how much time were you on Instagram last night? She said, 40 minutes. It was actually over 2 hours. I don't think she was lying. I think she lost track of time. She'd have a good time. This is your job. You must install parental monitoring app on every device your kid uses to access social media or the internet. And I go into these at greater length in your handout. I don't want to use up our last few minutes going into detail. You explain to your kid, look, my parents insisted on knowing where I was at all times. I have to know where you are at all times. Except now it's not out there, it's online. I will know every website you visit, every social media app you use, because that is my job as your parent. I will see every photo you take before you even do anything with it, because that's my job. And if I see anything inappropriate, you lose the device indefinitely. Many girls are going to bed with their phone switched on, and at 2 in the morning, she's getting a text. OMG, Jason and Emily just broke up. There's really big news. We'll have to talk about it. Parents are amazed to find that half the 9th grade class is awake and texting at 2 in the morning. Look, the rules of good parenting have not changed in 20 years. But 20 years ago, a teenage girl could not accept a phone call at 2 in the morning to exchange gossip because the phone would ring. And the parents would not allow it, because they knew it's more important for a kid to get a good night's sleep than to be up for an hour in the middle of the night exchanging gossip. That was true 20 years ago, and it's still true today. The only thing that has changed is technology. It's now very easy for your daughter to accept that text because the phone never rang, it buzzed. She has her phone on vibrate mode, and she's not talking, she's texting. But this is your job. At 9 o'clock at night, the very latest, you switch the phone off and you put it in the charger, which henceforth will be in the parents' bedroom. She can have it back tomorrow morning. This is your job. It is not reasonable to put this burden in the lap of your 14-year-old daughter. What is she supposed to say tomorrow in school? When her friend says, hey, I texted you last night at midnight, how come you didn't answer? Is your 14-year-old daughter supposed to say, well, researchers have found that sleep deprivation in adolescence is a major risk factor in the etiology of depression? Come on, that's ridiculous. You have to allow her to say, hey, my evil parents take my phone every night and time. Well, they have it until the next morning. This is your job. So I was speaking at another Christian school, and during Q&A, a father said, you know, Dr. Sax, I heard what you said about the importance of kids getting a good night's sleep and not texting at 2 in the morning. I get that. I totally agree with that. He said, but, I don't think I need to take my daughter's phone. She puts her phone on airplane mode every night when she goes to bed. And she uses it as her alarm clock and takes it out of airplane mode the next morning. So, she won't get interrupted during the night. I don't think I need to take her phone from her. And I said, how do you know that she keeps her phone in airplane mode? How do you know she doesn't take it out of airplane mode after she gets in bed? And Dad was clearly offended. And he said, Dr. Sax, you're suggesting my daughter would lie to me. My daughter would never lie to me. And I said, sir, I don't know you and I don't know your daughter, but I can tell you based on the research, your daughter's more likely to lie to you than to anyone else. Because she cares what you think. She doesn't want to disappoint you. She doesn't want to let you down. I said, there's great wisdom in the Lord's Prayer. Jesus did not say, make us strong to resist temptation. He did not say that. He said, lead us not into temptation. Because Jesus knew the human heart, and he knew that if you expose us to temptation, we will fall. Don't put that stumbling block in your daughter's path. No devices in the bedroom. No phones in the bedroom. Now, when you get home this evening, and you inform your daughter that you attended a presentation by Dr. Leonard Sax, and Dr. Sax recommends that you take her phone at 9 o'clock and switch it off and put it in the charger, which henceforth will be in the parents' room. Your daughter may not applaud. She may protest. She may say, but I use it as my alarm clock. Let her know they still make actual alarm clocks. She can go to the store and buy one, they're not expensive. And now she may get really upset. She may say, but what if there's an emergency? Remind her that you still have a landline, a house phone in the parents' bedroom. If there's a true emergency, her friend is welcome to call the house phone, and you, the parent, will pick up. And you, the parent, will decide whether this emergency warrants waking her up at 2 in the morning. It probably doesn't. It can probably wait. This is your job. It is not reasonable, it is not age appropriate to dump this in the lap of your teenager. No phones in the bedroom, no devices in the bedroom. That's not just my recommendation. Those are the official guidelines of the American Academy of Pediatrics. And I've included a link to the full text of the AAP guidelines in your handout, which are solid, sound, evidence-based guidelines. They had a leading group of researchers and pediatricians who spent 2 years formulating these guidelines based on the research. No internet access in the bedroom, the guidelines say. No unsupervised use of any device with internet access. No expectation of privacy. When a child or teenager is online, the device should be in a high traffic space like the living room where there is no expectation of privacy. Scholars define sexting as sending or receiving an obscene photo. They define obscene as the nipple of the female breast is exposed, male or female genitalia is exposed. Sexting remains unusual in the United States. But what has become very common is what some scholars are calling not quite sexting, which means a girl sending a provocative photo, but not an obscene photo. Every study published in the last 4 years finds that at least half, at least 50% of American girls 13 through 17 years of age have engaged in this kind of activity. New York Magazine devoted an entire issue. That is not quite sexting. The nipple is not exposed, the genitalia are not exposed. But this has become very common. So during Q&A at another of these events, the father said, Dr. Sax, I don't understand what you make such a fuss about not quite sexting. You explain it's not pornographic. She's not going to get arrested. Why are you being so puritanical? He said. That's the word he used, puritanical. And I explained that, look, this girl is posting a photo of herself for the arousal and amusement of boys. Scholars call that self-objectification. And we have a great deal of research showing that girls who engage in such activity are much more likely to agree with statements like how you look is way more important than what kind of person you are. They are much more likely to become anxious, less likely to be academically engaged. So I visited a very fine independent school, K through 12. 12-year-old girl had a 14-year-old boyfriend. He asked her to send him some photos, nothing obscene. Just wanted to see her pull off her uniform blouse and skirt to reveal bra and panties. So she went into her bedroom, closed the door, locked the door, and did as he had asked, and sent the photos to him using Snapchat with a 5-second self-destruct. Snapchat claims that you can send a photo with a 5-second self-destruct, and after the recipient has looked at the photo for 5 seconds, it will vanish. And if you, the recipient, try to save the photo using a screenshot, the sender will be notified. She believed that claim. Snapchat knows that claim to be false. They are lying. They are deliberately saying something that they know to be untrue. This boy, of course, had installed one of these free apps that allow you to save any photo or video sent via Snapchat without the sender being notified. He saved every one of the photos this girl sent. School administrators later determined he did not intend for anyone else to see the photos, but he was at a party, and he set his phone down to grab some chips and talk to some friends. It is back to his phone. When I speak to teenagers about this, I tell them, if you have one of these, it never leaves your person. If you're a boy, it's always in your pocket. If you're a girl and you don't have a pocket, it's in your purse, held against your body. You never separate yourself from your phone. You never turn your back on your phone. I call that basic digital hygiene. Well, no one had ever taught this boy that. It is back to his phone. Another boy wandered over, saw the phone, picked it up. The lock screen had not yet engaged. Scrolled to this girl's photo, to the gallery, found this girl's photos, forwarded each one of the photos to his own phone, exited the gallery, went back to the home screen, put the phone down exactly where he found it. First boy didn't know anything had happened. Second boy then posted every one of this girl's photos on his own Instagram. Within 3 days, everyone at the school had seen them. Boys this girl didn't even know were coming up to her and saying, "Hey, Emily, how about you put on striptease for us?" She had no psychiatric history. She collapsed. She got a phone call from her friend, one of her closest friends, who said, "I hate to make this phone call, but my mom is totally freaking out." The birthday girl had invited this girl to a 3-day ski weekend. But the birthday girl called up this girl and said, "My mom is totally freaking out because all the other moms are saying that if you're going to be there, they won't let their daughter come because they don't think you're some kind of bad influence. So I have to uninvite you. I'm really sorry. I have to uninvite you." This girl collapsed. She had no psychiatric history. She'd always done fine in school, had lots of friends. She refused to go to school, said her life was over. The photos would always be out there, which was absolutely true. Dozens of other boys had picked them up and reposted them, mostly on anonymous websites. She'll never get them down. Refused to go to school, started cutting herself with razor blades. Parents took her to the doctor. The doctor diagnosed depression and prescribed Lexapro 10 milligram and set the girl up for counseling. That accomplished nothing. So you now have a 12-year-old girl with depression, not responding to counseling or medication. Who's at fault? The girl? The boyfriend? The other boy? No, the kids. The parents are to blame. Look, this is a very grown-up device. With this device, I can take a photo and send a photo, and once I send it, I have no control over who sees it or what happens to it. That is a very grown-up functionality. If you're going to put such a device in the hands of a minor child, then you are responsible for every photo they take and every photo they see. So I wrote an op-ed for the Wall Street Journal, and I'm very specific in the guidelines I make. Based on the research, at what age is it appropriate for a child to possess a smartphone, meaning a phone that can take a photo and send a photo? Certainly no child under 13 should possess such a phone, and most 13-year-olds are not ready for it. If you're going to give your kid a smartphone, then you must install on the phone a parental monitoring app. Again, I go into more detail on these in your handout. And explain to your kid, I will see every photo as soon as you take it. If I see anything inappropriate, you lose the device indefinitely. Or don't give your kid a smartphone. And parents will say, look, that's totally unrealistic. My daughter's doing computer coding and soccer. What happens if her ride doesn't show up? There are no payphones out there anymore. I don't want her going up to a stranger asking to borrow their phone. All right, I get that. I am the parent of a teenage daughter. That's not an argument for a smartphone. That's an argument for a dumb phone. Meaning a phone that can make a phone call and receive a phone call, and that is all it can do. There are many such phones available. You don't know about them because they're not marketed to you. They're marketed to the elderly. My father-in-law has lived with us now for 12 years. He is 84 years old. This is his phone. He tells me the battery lasts forever. He charges about every other month. It doesn't need 3G, it doesn't need 4G, it works everywhere. And this is my daughter's phone. You give her this phone. That takes care of the safety concerns. If she gets stranded, she can call you on this phone. You don't need to give your kid a smartphone. But if you do give your kid a smartphone, you must install parental monitoring software on it and explain to your kid that you will see everything they do on their phone. And American parents push back. And during Q&A at one of these presentations, my mom said, I don't want to violate my daughter's privacy. I respect my daughter's privacy. If she doesn't want me to see her photos, I am fine with that. I don't want to see her photos if she doesn't want me to see them. And I told that mom, look, the most important thing you must teach your kid, son or daughter, is that there is no such thing as privacy to any photo that you share with a phone. Privacy is great. You want to share a photo privately? Here's what you do. You print it out on a piece of photo paper. Okay, you take it over to your friend's house, show it to them, and then shred it. That's privacy. There is no privacy to any photo that you share electronically. David Petraeus, in case you don't recall the story, graduated top of his class at West Point, first in his class at Fort Leavenworth, earned a doctorate at Princeton, Brigadier General, age 46. George W. Bush appointed him commanding general. Barack Obama named him director of the CIA. You would think he would know that there is no such thing as privacy to any photo that you share on your phone, but somehow he and his mistress didn't get the memo. They seem to have thought, we're so smart, we're so clever, we've got our passwords, no one will ever find out. Wrong. Career over. More recently, another variation on the story involving the world's richest man, the man who created Amazon. The story's a little different. Jeff Bezos' private photos were not hacked by a cybersecurity expert, as happened to David Petraeus. According to a federal investigation, he sent these photos to his mistress, Lauren Sanchez, who then shared them with her brother, who then sold them to the National Enquirer for $200,000. What is the moral of the story of David Petraeus and Jeffrey Bezos? Well, I can think of more than one moral. One moral is don't cheat on your spouse. These were both married men at the time of their infidelity. Another moral is don't share any photo on any device or any app, whether you think it's secure or not, unless you're prepared to see that photo in the newspaper tomorrow morning. And you don't teach that by preaching. You teach that by inculcating virtuous habits and not allowing bad habits to form. I have lived in this country all my life. 20 years ago, there used to be a public service announcement that would come on American television. It's 10 o'clock. Do you know where your kids are? Because 10 o'clock, 20 years ago, the dangers were out there. The drugs and the gangs and the violence were out there. It was 10 o'clock and your kid was home alone in her bedroom, then you were a good parent. And many of us were raised in that era. But the challenges today have changed because the technology has changed. If your daughter is alone in her bedroom with one of these, she could be uploading pornography, your son could be downloading pornography, she could be engaged in cyberbullying, your son could be a victim of cyberbullying. It's your job to be the parent. And a lot of American parents are confused. They want to be their kid's best friend. But a friend cannot command. A friend cannot say, I'm taking your phone at 9 o'clock so you can get some sleep. Only a parent can do that. There's any number of kids out there who can be your kid's best friend. None of them can be the parent. That's your job. If you're going to give your kid a smartphone, you must install parental monitoring software, which again I described at greater length in your handout. And some parents really get that. One parent went even a little further and sent her daughter an anonymous text. Hey Katie, can you send me some pictures? And her daughter responded, no, I know this is you, Mom. Please stop. Proud of you, honey. Keep making good choices. Love, Mom. So what really matters? What should our highest priority be as parents? You know, until recently, the answer to that question might have been a guess or a matter of opinion, but we now have good evidence that informs the answer to that question. And I'm talking now about longitudinal cohort studies, in which researchers follow kids from childhood through adolescence into adulthood. These studies allow us to say what characteristic of a child that you can influence best predicts good outcomes in adulthood. Turns out that what grades you get at school account for very little of the variance. Virtue and character are what counts. Character, conscientiousness, self-control, as measured at 12 years of age. How do you measure self-control in a 12-year-old? You don't do a marshmallow test. You don't talk to the kid at all. Those are not validated measures of self-control. You talk to the classmates and to the teachers. And you say, can this kid take turns? Can this kid listen to grown-ups and to peers? Low self-control measured at 12 years of age predicts a high risk of addiction to drugs or alcohol 20 years later, and a high risk of poor physical health. High self-control measured at 12 years of age predicts a low risk of drug and alcohol use 20 years later, and a low risk of poor physical health. Low self-control at 12 years of age predicts a high risk of financial struggles 20 years later. These graphs are in your handout. High self-control at age 12 predicts a low risk of financial struggles 20 years later. Low self-control at age 12 predicts a low credit rating 20 years later. High self-control at age 12 predicts a high credit rating 20 years later. What really matters? Teaching virtue and character. That's not a sermon. That is a robust empirical finding. I devote 2 chapters in my book, The Collapse of Parenting, to reviewing every relevant longitudinal cohort study. And every one of them comes to the same conclusion, that virtue and character predict good outcomes. And the funny thing is that American parents used to teach that. American parents used to say things like, I'd rather you get a C on the test honestly than cheat and get an A. And yet now it's common to find American parents who say things like, hey, you want to get into UT Austin? You're not just competing against American kids anymore, you're competing against kids from Asia and Europe. You've got to have amazing grades. And there has been an explosion in cheating over the past 20 years, which I document. When I asked you earlier this evening, which of these 5 parameters measured at 12 years of age best predicts health and wealth and happiness 20 years later, not one of you raised your hand to say grades at school. But many American parents act as if grades at school are the most important thing, even though they give lip service to the idea that virtue and character matter more. They act as if grades at school are the most important thing. And their son is now getting worse grades, and they bring him into me and say, boy, his grades are really tanking. Do you think he should be on Vyvanse or Adderall? The neighbor kid got on Vyvanse, and whoa, he did much better. What parameter, measured when a kid is 12 years old, powerfully and accurately predicts health and wealth and happiness 20 years later? It is self-control and other measures of conscientiousness like honesty Psychologists have known for many years that every human personality can be mapped on a 5-dimensional space. The 5 dimensions of human personality are conscientiousness and its subtraits of self-control and honesty, openness to new ideas, friendliness, agreeableness, emotional stability, and extroversion, introversion. Some elements of human personality are resistant to change, notably extroversion, introversion. And personality does become more fixed as we age, but even young adults can change significantly on some traits. And it turns out that self-control and honesty are not innate. They have to be taught. You must teach them. How do you teach self-control to a 12-year-old? You say, no dessert until you eat your vegetables. No games until all the chores are done and all the homework is done. And if that has not been the policy in your home, I encourage you to make it the policy in your home. And if that has not been the policy in your home, when you sit down your kid and you announce that henceforth there will be no video game consoles in the bedroom, no games until all the chores are done and all the homework is done, there will be an explosion. And the older the child, the longer and louder the explosion. But if both parents stand their ground, after 6 weeks, not after 1 week, after 6 weeks, you will have a child with better self-control. And in most cases, a happier child as well. So that's your job, to teach virtue. But that requires that you teach from a position of authority. If you're talking to your kid about not cheating on a test, and you say, I personally, I don't think I would cheat on tests because that's just not my thing, but you do you. Whatever floats your boat. You're not teaching anything. I have been a medical doctor for more than 33 years. I have witnessed firsthand the collapse of American parenting. As recently as 20 years ago, it was common for American parents to say things like, do unto others. That's not a suggestion, that is a command. But over the last 20 years, I've seen that command soften, morph into a question. And the question is often something like, how would you feel if someone did that to you? And the parent has no idea what to say when her son answers, if someone did that to me, I'd kick him in the nuts and then I'd sit on his face. And you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your might. And these words which I command you this day shall be upon your heart. Most English translations render that something like, teach them diligently to your children, but that is not what the Hebrew says. It would be easy to say that in biblical Hebrew. The verb would be lamed, but the verb here is not lamed. The verb is shanan. Shanan means to chisel in stone. So a better translation of that phrase might be, incise them or inscribe them on the hearts of your children. You will find that exegesis of Deuteronomy 6 on pages 133, 134 of my book, The Collapse of Parenting. On the very next page, I cite a column by a regular columnist for the New York Times, who wrote a column about enlightened parenting, in which he asserted that enlightened parenting means, and I quote, setting your child free to discover for themselves their own right and wrong. And if in so doing your child becomes a stranger to you, then so be it. End quote. That may seem enlightened to some, but it is not enlightened. It is a dereliction of duty. If you set your kid free to discover for themselves their own right and wrong, and they speak English, and they live in the United States, what they will discover is Akon, Eminem, Miley Cyrus, Bruno Mars, Childish Gambino, Billie Eilish. She is advising a dereliction of duty. This is your job. But your problem is that you live in the United States. I took this photo in Times Square. Live for now, Pepsi slogan. Don't worry about the sugar, live for now. Whatever floats your boat, live for now. If it feels good, do it. real hazard of contemporary American culture right now, the culture of if it feels good, do it, and whatever floats your boat, is that it deliberately undermines self-control, overvalues fame and wealth, and disrespects parental authority. So what can you do about it? We began this evening talking about the breaking of bonds across generations. You must restore the bonds. You must fight for supper at home. No screens allowed at the dinner table. No phones at the dinner table. The benefits are huge. Frank Elgar and his colleagues interviewed more than 10,000 adolescents coast to coast and asked them, in the last 7 days, how many evening meals have you had at home with a parent? 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, or 7. And then for each of these 10,000 plus adolescents, they quantified internalizing problems like anxiety and depression, externalizing problems like hitting the wall in anger, positive well-being, pro-social behavior, and life satisfaction. And they found a huge effect, not just going from 0 to 7, but in almost every step along the way. Let's look at 5 evening meals at home with a parent to 6 evening meals at home with a parent, going from 5 to 6. And incidentally, you only need one parent for this effect. You don't need both parents. Going from 5 to 6, they see a significant decrease in internalizing problems, a significant decrease in externalizing problems, a significant increase in positive well-being and life satisfaction. And yet, what has happened? Researchers asked teenagers, in the last 24 hours, have you had a meal at home with a parent? In 1992, 2/3 of teenagers said, yes, I have. In 2005, 2/3 of teenagers said, no, I have not. And other research suggests it's only gotten worse since then. That's a huge change in a short amount of time. You've got to fight for supper at home. And if computer coding class conflicts with supper at home, then cancel computer coding class. I find parents who are driving their kids from one activity to another, eating the evening meal in the car on their way from computer coding class to soccer class. And the unintended message they are sending is that being amazing and doing all these amazing things is more important than time at home with family. Don't send that message. Cancel the class. Fight for time at home. My wife and I went to buy a new car, and the salesman found out we have a teenage daughter. He's very excited and wanted to sell us the rear seat entertainment system and handed us this flyer. Let's take a look. The 2 kids are wearing headphones looking at a screen. Mom is looking back at her kids, smiling as if to say, hey, this is great. We can drive to Houston, never have to talk to my kids at all. What are we thinking? We're all in a rush. Time is short. Time in the car is special time. It's private time. No earbuds, no headsets in the car. When you're in the car, you should be listening to your daughter, and she should be listening to you, not to Bruno Mars or Miley Cyrus. When your daughter asks if she can bring her best friend along on the next vacation, the answer is no. Because if she brings her friend along, it's going to be her and her friend on the ride in the Haunted Mansion. It needs to be you and her on the ride in the Haunted Mansion. That's the point of the vacation, is to strengthen the parent-child bond. If she brings her best friend along, all you have done is to subsidize a very expensive play date. American parents are confused. They think they have to choose between being the tiger mom pushing their kids to achieve or the Irish setter dad who just wants kids to be happy. That is a false dichotomy. Both are mistaken. Last chapter of The Collapse of Parenting is titled The Meaning of Life. Part of your job to impart to your child your understanding of the big picture. Why are we here? And the answer better be something better than getting into UT Austin or earning a lot of money, because those answers will not satisfy. A man's life does not consist in the abundance of his possessions. If you don't give your kid that bigger picture of what it's all about, then working hard to get a good mark just becomes a race to nowhere, to borrow the title of a documentary making that point. And the result is anxiety, depression, and disengagement. You can't be the Irish setter dad just letting kids do whatever they desire unless you have first educated desire. Because researchers find when you let American kids do what they most want, what boys want is video games and what girls want is social media. You've got to instill in your child a longing for something better, deeper, more lasting than video games and social media. We began with a question. Why are American kids today so much more likely to be anxious, depressed, disengaged compared with American kids a generation ago, or I might add, compared to kids right now in Scotland, in German-speaking Switzerland, in New Zealand? And what can we do about it? Here are my answers. The bonds across generations have been broken. You must restore them. You must fight for supper at home. Parents have allowed screens to displace real-world experience. But you must change that. You must limit and govern how much time your kids are spending on social media, video games, and other screens. American culture now prioritizes fame and wealth over virtue and character. You and I cannot change Hollywood. We cannot change the most popular videos on YouTube. But you can create a culture in your home. A culture of respect. A culture that prioritizes family. You find more on these topics in my books. And people in Fredericksburg, I understand, do a lot of driving, so I want you to know all of my books are available as audiobooks. Translations are available in these 7 languages. If you found this message useful, and you know of another group that might benefit, I hope you will come up, take a business card, send me an email. The handout again is online. The link is my name, leonardsax.com/ambleside.pdf. It is case sensitive. It is all lowercase, and you must include the www and the .pdf. If you go to the website, leonardsax.com, you can sign up for my newsletter, and I send out that only about once a month. Comments, questions that you have about anything I have said or a story you'd like to share with your colleagues?